Hello, everyone, and welcome to this conversation presented by White House Custom Color.
Are you trying to mute me? No, it's just real loud, and I can't.
I sold Amazon when it was $25.
Listening to listen, not listening to respond.
Yes. Oh, thank you for that.
It is absolutely surreal to meet you and to be speaking with you right now. I can't even believe that this is happening, to be quite honest with you. I'm going to tell you
we're in another life, actually.
Well, maybe that would explain a lot.
I think so. Yeah.
I want to tell you something. I want to say, okay, so last night I'm talking with a really good friend of mine from Arizona, an amazing photographer. Her name's Allison Tyler Jones. I tell her that your name comes in because when someone books a spot, I see, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
Gregory Heisler I can't even say your name. I'm so tongue tied right now. Gregory Heisler just booked a spot. And she was like, oh, that is amazing. She said, he is a photographer's photographer.
Wow. Can I tape this? That's good. I want those mornings when you wake up and you're feeling kind of crappy. It'd be good to have that.
It's kind of weird. I kind of want to know, what is it like? How self-aware are you of you?
Well, that's the thing. I think what I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to go and have it tattooed on my forehead backwards. So every morning when I brush my teeth, it's going to say, you are a photographer's photographer. And I'll just wear a hat over it so other people don't see it. But in the morning,
it's just for yourself.
I'll have it there.
It's just for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be like, wake up and you're there.
Honestly,
that sounds great.
I'm not a photographer. My wife is a photographer. But I thought to myself,
my condolences. Yeah.
Well, I thought that is about as great a compliment, I would think, as someone can receive, like, oh, he's like the guy that the rest of us pros really, really, really look to. Right. And I think that's been the case for a long time with you.
Wow. Well, I'd trade that for like, man, that dude is sexy. I'd swap it for that.
Well, then
that's okay.
We can relate.
I'll take it.
We can relate in a lot of ways. I also wanted to bring up the fact that you, on your form, because I ask, like, what do you want to talk about? And you say, Arnold Newman, what else is there to talk about? Right?
Hey. Yep.
Do you get sick of that?
Oh, no, not at all. No, not at all.
Well, and I don't mean because of him by any means. I mean, because, well, here's my theory. You correct me if I'm wrong about this.
Okay.
And I want to ask you about this too. But here you are associated with Arnold Newman, right? Essentially your whole career, which is pretty darn cool. Let's just throw that out there.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah.
But at some point where you carved your own path, obviously. At some point, were you in a transition phase to like come out of the constant association, not because of him, but because of everybody else constantly making those associations? Like, I wondered to myself, he's got to be very used to talking about Arnold Newman all the time, right?
No, I mean, it's not all the time. And honestly, it's a great thing. I'm not being like fake humble. It's like really a big honor. And one could do worse than to get associated with Arnold Newman their entire life.
Oh, I think so.
That's like, I think it's great. And I also feel like he's like, Arnold was never groovy. Do you know what I mean? Like, he never did fashion. He wasn't a celebrity. He was a photographer's photographer to me. And so I feel like he's sort of like an unsung hero. He's sort of like not slipped in the cracks, but again, Avedon, Penn, people know them also because they shot fashion, right? Arnold was the most uncool guy ever. And after I worked with him, like in the maybe early 80s, in fact, even when I was working for him, there was a guy who came to the studio to see him about something. And he was a guy who worked at the gallery that represented Arnold, which was the Light Gallery at the time. And the guy kind of leaned over to me and said, well, Arnold's like one of our sort of commercial photographers, really, that kind of thing. And I was 21 and I thought, you asshole. I mean, I was thinking even then,
Right.
And really, and even then, and many years later, this same guy, I see his pictures in magazines shooting still lifes. Like he's, it's such a funny thing. So to me, among fine artists, he was too commercial, and he was never really a commercial photographer in the cranking it out kind of way. And he was one of I think, really a handful of photographers whose assignment work really was his personal work. And he would sort of bend every assignment to be his personal work, even though he wouldn't have called it that.
Yeah.
And so in a sense, every time he did an assignment, it was like this ever increasing body of work. Mary Ellen Mark would be someone like that. There's like a handful of people for whom kind of, it wasn't like they screwed on one head and did jobs and then screwed on another head and did personal work. It was really the same person all the way along. And I think that's really unusual. And I think that he's never been a household name, even among photographers, even among portrait photographers. I'll say Arnold Newman, they go, who? It really happens a lot. You'd be surprised.
They would know his images. Who hasn't seen
here's an example.
Who hasn't seen the Picasso, or the guy at the piano? Is it Stravinsky?
Yeah.
Sitting at the piano. Who hasn't seen that? Right?
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. There's a woman who came to, I'm teaching at Syracuse University now, and there's a woman who came there to speak, he who shall remain nameless, she who shall remain nameless. And she's a really big deal documentary photographer now. She's a young person. We're sort of like one of those Magnum nominee kind of folks. Mm-hmm. Really, really great. And the department chair and I took her out to dinner. She gave a little talk. And the department chair said, you might be actually interested to know that a lot of people are surprised that actually at Syracuse University, we have the entire archive of Margaret Bourke-White. And she was like, who? And maybe this is Margaret Bourke-White. She's like the original documentary photographer in a way, So I think there's among photographers, and particularly among younger photographers, there's not a big awareness of photography history. They know what's on Instagram, but they don't really know who came before. And it's interesting because if you talk to cinematographers, they all know each other. They all know who did what. They all know people who were working in the 1920s. There's this really strong sense of the foundations. So that's my thing with Arnold, is I feel like I'm his crusader in a way to keep his name alive. I am kind of, yeah.
Well, don't you think that for somebody like him that wasn't, all right, so he wasn't one of the cool kids, so to speak, right? He didn't, it seems to me, and I didn't know him, but it seems to me like he might not have put much stock into conveying some sort of an image or trying to make people think that he was a certain way. He was who he was.
I think he couldn't have cared less, honestly. He would talk about, these so-called fine art photographers. He said, Jesus Christ, so you wouldn't call yourself a fine art painter or a fine art sculptor. You're just a painter or a sculptor. Why are these photographers so insecure? A fine art photographer. I was like,
that's very interesting.
Right? You've never seen on a card like fine art painter. It's like...
Right. It doesn't happen. It's redundant. I'm wondering then, do you think that as a result of that, not for today's generation even, but even for maybe my generation, because I'm probably older than what you think I am, or maybe I'm not, but I would say that even for my generation and maybe even yours, don't you think that there's an awful lot of influence there that stems directly from him and people have no idea?
Well, it's not even a question. Not only that, is an influence that stems from him. And this is to me so interesting. He sort of kind of invented what people think of as the environmental portrait, so to speak. He wouldn't have called it exactly that, but the truth is, even now, nobody really does it better. He still kind of did them the best. I hopefully took it and moved it in a little different direction and kind of put my own thing on it. But in his way, no one really did that better. And tons of people do it. And it's sort of like, if you're going to copy it, don't do it worse. It's like, at least do it better, you know? Like, he already showed you what to do. It's like, don't do it worse. Like, how many people are like Penn wannabes or Avedon wannabes? You know, it's like, and honestly, I went through a phase like that.
If you're going to copy it, if you're going to straight up copy it, right?
At least nail it.
Without putting,
if not,
right.
If not bringing it up a notch, at least nail it.
Right.
You know, like you have the actual thing to look at, for crying out loud.
Right.
You know?
Right. Okay, let me ask you this then, because what I wanted to do, I'm glad we discussed him a little bit, because I know he's important and he's a big deal to you, even personally, right?
Yeah.
But what I was super intrigued by, and take me back a little bit if you can, because this is what really gets to me. It's 1975 apparently, and you had gotten to the point where you were just going to show up in how does that what's the before that look like to get to that point?
Nothing. I mean, I had 3 freshman years in college at 3 different places, basically in a row. That's as far as I got. And I grew up in Chicago, so I was back in Chicago. I'd had my 3rd freshman year was at RIT in Rochester. Went back to Chicago, and I was like freelance assisting to the extent that I did that around in Chicago. And Chicago was primarily like a tabletop town at that point. Mostly that's a lot of still life. And I actually interviewed at Kraft Foods, which is in Chicago. And the guy who's head of the photo department, I swear to God, he said, "Kid," he said, "there's 3 kinds of photography. There's people, product, and cheese. Here we do cheese." Actually said that. It's true. And the other place, though, that I interviewed, where I ended up being able to work, there was Kraft, and the other big place in Chicago was Playboy. That was the big thing then. Yeah. Yeah. So I interviewed there, and they called me because some guy called in sick, and it was like I was the top of the pile. You know, they'd just seen me. So they called me, and I had worked there for like not even a week. But at maybe the Monday or the Friday of the week before, I just sent a letter to Arnold. That's the letter you send. He was my idol beyond all mortal men. Right. And I sent him a letter that just said, "Dear Mr. Newman, you know, I admire you beyond. I'd work for you for free, blah, blah, blah," like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working at Playboy, as you know, again, low man on the totem pole for sure. And on like the Thursday, maybe, I came home and there was an envelope, I still have it, from Arnold Newman's studio. Right. I couldn't believe it. And I open up the thing, and there's a typewritten letter from him with his signature on it. Like, who even answers letters like that? Nobody does. Nobody does, for sure. Right. And if they do, like the studio manager, the first assistant, like nobody does it. It's from him. And it just basically said, "Dear Mr. Heisler, thank you for your recent inquiry. Unfortunately, we don't hire people from out of town, blah, blah, blah. Best of luck." It's kind of what it was, right? And it had a signature. And I thought, oh my God, like I have Arnold Newman's signature on a piece of paper. Like all my buddies at photo school, they would die to think that, oh my God,
that's unreal.
Right? So encouraged by that, I immediately picked up the phone and called him. So I called the studio, the number was on it, and he picked up the phone, the studio. And I said, "Is this Arnold?" He goes, "Speaking." And I said, "Mr. Newman, this is Greg Heisler. I'm in Chicago. I just got your letter, and I was wondering," he cut me off and he said, "I thought I made myself perfectly clear." Right? It was a quick conversation. So it didn't last very long, and I hung up. And I thought, like, we have a relationship now. We know each other, right? We know each other. He knows me. Literally, like I was such a dope. And I was like buoyed by that totally. And I thought, what I got to do is go see him. Now that we have this we've established this great relationship, I'll go see him. And he'll understand. You have such a great
rapport at that point that he obviously wants me to come out and visit.
Totally. So I went back to Playboy the next day, and I told him that I got this letter from Arnold. I might have even brought it in. And I was like, should I do it? Because for anybody else working at Playboy, it's like all the Christmases came at once, right? But for me, no, I want to work for Arnold. It's like, and all the guys like, "No, do it, man, do it. That's great. Like, we'll be here. Don't worry about it. You go do
Honestly,
that." I can't believe
that entered my mind. You're leaving Playboy to go work for Arnold Newman, even go work for. Right.
Yeah. So they were all super encouraging. So the next Monday, that was on Friday, Monday, I literally caught the 6:30 flight out of O'Hare, landed at LaGuardia at 9:00, wearing a jacket and tie, because that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I called him from the airport, and he picked up the phone again. Studio. And I said, Mr. Newman. He goes, yes. I said, this is Greg Heisler. I talked to you on Friday. And he literally says, Jesus Christ, like that.
Yeah.
And then he said, oh, this doesn't sound like long distance. That's when long distance sounded like, like the transatlantic cable or something,
yes.
you know?
Yes. Yes.
And so I said, actually, I'm at LaGuardia Airport. And again, he said, like, Jesus Christ, what are you doing there?
Yeah.
I said, well, I know you're really busy, but I was wondering if you just had a minute. I brought a portfolio, and he never mastered the red hold button on the phone. He cupped his hand over it, and he and his wife worked together. They had their desks right next to each other. She ran the place. And I heard him distinctly say, it's that kid again. What the hell am I supposed to do? And I heard her say, Arnold, what's wrong with you? Have him come over. So he came back on the phone. Yeah. And he said, well, I'm very busy, but since you are here, I suppose I'll take, come on by. So I took a cab. I'd never been to New York. It wasn't like Dreams of Gotham. Like if Arnold had been in Omaha, I'd probably still be in Omaha, but
Right.
He was there. I went to see him, and I had my portfolio, which was no great shakes. It was like a picture of my dad, a high school wrestling picture, a picture of an egg from RIT, whatever it was. I was a good printer. I thought my prints were good, black and white prints. And so he looked at my stuff. And again, I think I was like a nice kid in a tie, right? This is 1975. People had hair like down their backs. I probably looked like an insurance salesman, And the one thing he did is he tested me. Back in the day when you were making black and white prints, they'd have little dusties on them, and they would look like little white specks or little hairs, sort of.
Yeah.
And you'd have to, it's called spotting. You'd have to spot them out. There's this stuff called spot tones, it's like a dye. And you'd have to sort of, with a stippling technique, kind of camouflage it so you wouldn't see it on the prints. And it's very hard to do well. And because I was so nervous, my hand was shaking so bad, my stippling technique was like amazing that day, I think. And he was impressed. And he said, I don't even know why I'm saying this, but we are looking for somebody, and if you could spend the night, we'll try you out in the darkroom tomorrow. Literally. I never thought he was going to say that. And I have spent the night, and it's like, I didn't even have underpants with me. I didn't think I was going to be staying the night, right?
You just
and I
showed
didn't
up.
have money for a hotel, nothing. I didn't even know. Like this before credit, I didn't have credit cards, nothing. So I literally slept on a park bench that night.
You
and
did?
Yep. And went in the next day and worked in the darkroom. And he said, he hired me. You like my prints? And he said, you can spend, I told him what happened the night before. And he and his wife were mortified, like, he should have told us, that kind of thing. So he let me sleep on the couch in the studio for the rest of the week. Then I went home and got clothes and came back and found a place to sublease. And I was there. All of a sudden I was in New York. Like I didn't know anybody, nothing. I was just there. And it was an amazing experience. It wasn't like he would sit me down and say, Greg, let's talk about photography. It wasn't like that. It was like a mentor, master slave kind of thing, literally, and it was tough for me. It was tough. I mean, it was just his personality. He didn't mean anything by it. But instead of saying, oh, excuse me, Greg, can you move that light over there? Like in front of 10 people on a shoot, he'd be, how many times do I have to tell you? It was like that kind of thing.
Of course.
So, and then later that afternoon, he'd come over and say, hey, how's my favorite photographer doing? And this guy just ripped me a new one that morning, and it was like having God do it, But he didn't mean anything by it.
Now,
and the person,
you had to stop that because you got an ulcer. Did I read that right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
The stress and the tension.
I was naive. I was a very young 21, and I was very lucky. My parents were really sweet. Of course, I was the perfect child, so they never had a reason to yell at me. But it was like I had a good growing up time. And the person who worked there before me was there for like 5 years. The person who was there after me was there for like 7 years. And for them, it's like, yeah, it's like, water off a duck's back. Yeah, that's just Arnold. Don't worry about it. It's no big deal. But to me, it was like, it really rattled me. Again, not his fault. It really rattled me a lot. And when I told him I had to leave him what it was, he felt terrible. I mean, he did. But it's not like we really kept in touch. Like for the first 5 or 7 years or something like that after, I was scared of the guy. It wasn't like I was going to keep in touch,
Right.
But we sort of reconnected later, and had this kind of, it was like not like I saw him often, but it was like having his respect was a huge deal for me. You can imagine.
Well, I wanted to ask you, like, did you ever get a sense from him based on then after you had started to carve out and got to the point where you had carved out your own niche?
Yeah.
Did you ever get a sense from him of how he then felt about your work and what you had accomplished? Did that ever happen?
Not in so many words, but I think just the fact that he related to me in a different way. I think it's just different.
Else.
Like the next time I saw him, I was already sort of doing stuff.
Yeah.
And there's the main photographic workshop is still a great workshop, main media workshops. And I was asked to teach a workshop there. I'm going to say like 84, 82 or something. It's like, 7 years later, 8 years later. And I found out that week, he was going to be there the same week teaching a class. And I just about thought, I thought, oh my God, he's going to yell at me in front of everybody. It's going to be like horrible.
You had those trauma responses coming.
Yeah. I really thought I was like, what am I going to do? Should I even go? And it was the opposite. Like he came up and gave me a big hug. And like, Greg, it's so great to see you. So that was like amazing. It was great. And there was an exhibition of his work, I'm going to say like a year and a half ago at the Howard Greenberg Gallery. They represent him. And it was on the occasion of what would have been his 100th birthday. It was a centenary exhibition. And they came out with a book, a beautiful book called Arnold Newman 100. And it's 100 of his images in the book. It's really great. And they asked me to write an afterword to the book. And I spent all summer working on this thing. And it was a huge, it's like a huge honor now because I'm like sort of linked with him. And I'm sure he would think like, what the hell did you ask? He's my assistant, for Christ's sake. Get like a museum director or a Heisler. But, I mean, he's a nice kid, but Jesus Christ, what would you hire him for? I'm sure, I'm sure. Yeah. No, it's funny.
Let me ask you this then. At what point, again, because we all the time stuff obviously stands out to people. At what point though did you think to yourself, I'm doing pretty good for myself here. Like this is working. I'm going to be able to do this.
Yeah. I don't ever think I thought of it like, hey, you're a badass. This is working great. I think
sure.
I was just super excited to be doing the work, super excited to be doing like the time stuff. It's like, it's honestly an unbelievable privilege to be able to do that stuff.
Yeah. And
I was just in it 10,000 million %. Like it's literally all I did, not because I was a workaholic, which is more fun than like going bowling or playing golf or going to the movies. Like, oh my God, they want me to take a picture. How cool is that?
Right.
Seriously.
Right.
It's like, well, that was more fun than anything else I'd be doing,
How did
including
you not
sending
get
out
burned
invoices. Not so smart. I just loved it. Honestly, I did. I'd get tired, but not burnt out. It was, it actually kind of fed itself. It was super fun. I mean, I tell my students, like, however much fun you think photography is, it's way better than that. It is. Well, it's way better than that.
So here's the other thing I was wondering. So like from a psychological standpoint, because I really like psychology, I'm wondering like, because to do all the stuff for time and all the other things that you've done that are kind of like, I don't know, to the layman there, that's a real high pressure. You're sitting there with a president.
No, it is a high pressure thing for sure. Yeah.
You got to get this shot. And I'm wondering, like, did that time with Arnold toughen you up or like help you get to a point where you were more psychologically capable of working under pressure or getting that shot without, or were you a mess then too? I don't know. I mean,
I think a couple of things. I think you always get nervous before. I mean, I do. I always get super nervous before a shoot, even during the shoot sometimes. Usually once I'm in it, it all gets quiet and I'm fine. I'm honestly fine. Like, this is going to sound super hokey dokey, but in the last 2 months, I've started getting into yoga. Now, I'm like the last guy ever to do this. My wife is a yoga person. She's really into it. And I was like, oh my God. But
yeah, same.
during COVID, I just thought, well, I'll give it a shot, sort of. And one of the things they talk about, not just doing all the poses, but from a mental standpoint, they talk about kind of your sort of one-pointed attention, and that all the stuff of mantras and chanting and the poses is literally to focus your mind. That's kind of the whole idea. And for me, like, photography focuses my mind that way, really, and you could see like an athlete where they talk about being in the zone and everything else goes quick. They don't have to do the yoga. They already get that. I get that from photography for sure. So at the moment that I'm doing the thing, I'm just in it. I mean, 100%. So all the notion of being nervous or this or that, it just goes away because I'm so intent on what I'm honestly just so intent on what I'm doing. It's really a cool thing. I have to say it is. It's like very addictive in a way. And then when it's all done, like I have a book of my pictures, and honestly, I look at those and I'm happy to have the book. Like, this is my little office at home that I created for doing Zooms with my students to teach remotely.
Yeah.
I don't have any of my pictures up here. But like, I already know what they look like. I don't know, all photographers always have their own pictures.
You were there.
Yeah, I kind of know them, I have to have them. Plus the other thing is I look through the book, and to me, they're all like failures. Like, all I see when I look at them is like,
what?
Shit. Like,
really?
What it should have been, or you were nervous, or you missed the moment, or like every time, like, not like they're terrible pictures.
Right.
But they just, I definitely wouldn't want to be surrounded by them. That's for sure.
Well, an artist's big, like, what is it? It's an artist's biggest critic is himself. Is it some of that? Like, you're your own worst critic.
Like, it's different. If this were my working studio, I might have like test prints up or something. That'd be a different thing. That's like a work in progress. Yes. But that's not what this is. And I really put this up just because it's interesting for the students. They look at it and go like, wow, what's that? And it's stuff that gets me interested, that I'm like inspired by, and it also becomes a test. Like, I'll shift something around, see if they see it, that kind of thing.
All that being said, though, do you have something, like, even when you're looking back through your book, or when you see your own work, you have to have something, and you might even be able to pick it out specifically considering the critique you have for yourself, but you have to have something where you're like, oh, I nailed that one. I got that. That's it. That's the one.
It's simultaneously, like, I do feel like that happened in many cases, but even with those, I totally see where it fell short, sort of. I do. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Again, I'm happy that it worked out, right? And I'm happy that when I brought the pictures into Time magazine, they were happy with them. That's a great thing. But the truth is, you have to, as a photographer, you have to have a sense internally of when you're on it and when you're not on it. And because I think I could bring in what I thought were the best pictures I've ever done, and I could bring them in, and they'd look at it and say, Greg, this just isn't what we had in mind.
Because that's not what they wanted.
And like, I'm not Kreskin. I can't imagine what they have in your mind, but is that, right? Or I could bring in pictures where I just think, geez, I don't know. Like, I hope this is okay. And I, kind of tentatively hand them in, and they go, see, that's why we hire Heisler every time. Just the genius. How do you do it? How the hell do you do it? Really? And it doesn't mean those pictures were better than the other pictures. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to have an internal sense of if it's okay or not okay. I think if you're a musician, you do a concert, everybody's still applauding, but what nights you were better and what nights not so much. I
get that point. Yeah, that makes sense. So, I like that analogy.
No, it's it's really what it is, for sure.
You're teaching a lot now. You mentioned that full time. Do this for.
I'm a professor, man. I'm a distinguished professor. I have that's right.
That's
I didn't graduate college, and I'm a distinguished professor. Yeah, no, it's what I do for sure. Yeah.
Compare the two. Compare what it's like for you in the zone, in the studio. Let's say there's a prime minister or somebody sitting in front of you, right?
Yep.
As opposed to you're in that classroom, you have those students, you have their ear, they're all sponges and soaking up everything you say. I mean, are we just talking about two fantastic worlds for you?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I get nervous before the class, for sure.
Yeah.
School's starting up again next week. I'm very, anxious about that. As soon as I get in front of the students, I'm in that same kind of, it's different, but the same thing. It's like when you're waiting in the dentist's office and it's horrible. Once you're in the chair, it's like, okay, I'm here. You know what I mean? Like once you're in it, you're sort of in it. And I do feel like that. I think that the teaching to me is, in some ways it's way more stressful because I feel so responsible for them.
Do you really?
Like when I was shooting, I was just responsible for me. And obviously I wanted to get the picture for the magazine or the client. But in this case, it's like, man, I feel a tremendous responsibility for the students. I really do. I feel like it's a big, that's a big responsibility. And also, like I said, I'm like not a yeller. I'm not the kind of person. Yeah. And a lot of teachers are pretty hard on the students. And I just feel like my motto in a way, it's sort of like, you never know what someone's next picture is going to be. You just don't know. People will surprise you. And so a lot of teachers are like, I ripped them a new asshole today or that kind of thing. And it's like, I'd hate to have somebody be discouraged because for somebody like their pictures, their really good pictures might be 5 years out or 2 years out or 10 years out. And if they actually don't get to that point, that's on me. That's a little sad. You
feel the responsibility to help them get there, to help them weather the storms in between, right?
Yeah. And I'm really honest about that. It is hard. And that, you'll take a lot of shitty pictures,
right.
For sure. But it's like, they just have to keep going at it. The thing that people don't realize, I think, is two things, which has actually become really interesting. One is, particularly graduate students, they come in and they're in love with the idea of being a photographer. They're not necessarily in love with photographing, right? Like it's like being in love with the idea of being a rock star, not actually so in love with the idea of like working 1 million hours and rehearsing every day.
Right.
Like
I really don't want to practice.
No, they love the idea of being Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. They're not really in love with like training night and day and being sore all the time and lifting weights and blah, 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 and all that. They just think that'd be awesome.
Has that not always been the case with a lot of people? There's certain people that haven't been that way, but is that new? That mindset?
I think among students who I know now, it's more prevalent. They're not in love with the thing of the actual doing of it. And that's what you spend your time doing. And that wants to be the cool part, hopefully. Like I was saying, to me, that was more fun than anything. I think it's great.
Well, how much of that is due to technology?
Well, it's interesting. In a way, the technology feeds it because I actually saw really interesting. Here's another, ready for this? This is a big epiphany I had like a year ago. The difference between digital and film, right? Okay. With digital, you're always looking at your last picture, right?
Yes.
With film, you're always thinking about your next picture.
The next one.
It's a completely different orientation. And and you would think for film photographers who've been film photographers, they got into digital and they thought, oh my God, this is great. I can shoot as much as I want. It's free.
Right.
For the students, they look at it and they say, okay, I got it. I'm done. Let's go get a beer. I'm done. We're finished.
They don't have the basis of comparison because they don't know.
Nope. And I think I saw a movie a while back that was a little documentary that was done. There have been all these day in the life of books, like A Day in the Life of America, A Day in the Life of Australia. It was a really cool series. And the first one was in Australia. It was in 81. And they did a documentary where they followed half a dozen of the photographers around doing their thing. It was so cool to watch it because you never saw a photographer take a picture and then put their camera down and look at the back of it. They were always engaged through the lens. Or if they pulled the camera down, you saw them looking around like, okay, where should I be? What's the next thing?
Yeah.
So to me, it was so striking to see that because it's completely a forward-looking orientation to what you're doing.
So as an instructor then, given that you have, I'll call it that extra challenge that exists now, how do you compensate for that with your students? Do you have to bring that up and like that's a big part of the curriculum or a piece of
I make learning? It a focus for sure. And initially in some classes, I actually when I could control it, now they have their own cameras, but when I could control it, I literally like gaffer tape over the monitor on the back of the camera. Right. And now you can just you can obviously turn it off. You can just disable it.
Right.
But you can't make sure that they're going to do that, obviously. But what's interesting is because of the metadata that comes with the pictures, you can see if their first picture was done at 8:03 and the last one was done at 8:07.
Oh, time-wise, yes.
And I'll see that. And it's like, when it comes to critique time, it's like, we're not even going to look at your pictures. Like, it's going to take us longer to talk about them than do for you to shoot them. It's like I've done pictures in 5 minutes, but that's after like 4 hours of setting up and figuring it out.
Right. Well,
it's
and because
it's a different kind of picture.
You're probably in situations where you have like 5 minutes with your subject.
That's all I ever have, mostly. Yeah.
You come in, you got 6 minutes with this guy.
Yep. Yeah, it's quick. I mean, again, that's another interesting thing is at the school at Newhouse where I teach, it's kind of it's steeped in photojournalistic and documentary tradition. That's kind of what it is. There is a commercial side to it for sure, but that's kind of how it's thought of. And certainly a lot of the teachers there, and they're great. Their whole thing is like, before you even start taking pictures, you have to spend time with your subject and get to know them, and you should live with them and do this, and like that whole kind of thing, which is no argument there. Right. I have 5 minutes. I don't get to do any of that, right?
Yeah, that doesn't exist for you.
It's neither better nor worse. It's just different.
Completely.
So in a sense, all the things they're talking about, I feel I have to have like my antenna out and pick it up right away. Like you walk in, you're like, okay, who's this person? Where do I need to be? Where's the light? Where should I put my stuff? How much time am I going to have? What's going to look like? What's the article about? How am I going to say it? Like in like super, super, super fast, you have to process all this stuff. And it's not better or worse. It's just interesting. It's different. Mm-hmm. Like for me, on the odd occasion when I've had time, it's like the endless first date. It's like, oh, Jesus, I got to get out of here, man. I can't be charming this long. I got to get home. Like the dinner was good. Like, oh my God.
I can only play this game so long.
Oh my God. You know, it's like, gee, like I already have friends. Like I don't need, it's like, it's tough. Really
I don't need
tough.
More friends.
I'm good.
I kind of understand that. Tell me this, because this is kind of an elephant in the room for everybody. I think that, we're just coming off, whatever 2020 was, who knows how even to describe it. Mm-hmm. What was it like for you then? I mean, you're doing a lot of teaching now. What that all got flipped on its head with the way that has to happen. Mm-hmm. How did you handle that?
Honestly, I thought it was going to be a disaster. I did. And for those of us of a certain age, I'm looking at my class on the screen. That's like I'm playing Hollywood Squares is what it looks like. I'm ready for like Dom DeLuise and Paul Lynde to show up in one of the squares. It's kind of what it feels like,
But so great.
I thought it was going to be really tough. And really, to my surprise, I'm not kidding you. Like in some ways it was better. I found that many students kind of, instead of being disengaged, actually spoke up more than they would have in class, because I think they weren't sort of intimidated by having people around them. They're sort of safe at home, maybe. I don't know. Like the way people do with their computers, and they say horrible shit on their computer because they're like, it's anonymous in a way.
Right.
I think in a funny way, it's a little like, it's really surprising and really good for sure.
So you were able to engage in ways that you weren't necessarily with individuals in particular in a classroom.
It was different, but it was pretty cool. It's easier to draw people out in a way. Yeah. And in class, there are people who just sort of are the more dominant, personalities, and that's less so in this format. And also, like I say, I set up, this is just like a spare bedroom in my house, but I set it up so it would be cool for them, and the first day of class, I looked at them all and I said, this is a portrait class. I'm looking at 20 really shitty portraits. Like by next week, like some of you guys look like you're in the witness protection program. There's like a window behind you. I can't even see you, By next week, I want to be looking at 20 portraits. Like I want you to think about what the background is. I want to think about what the light is on you. Like, come on. Right. Like, I don't want to look at 20 shitty pictures. It's like, I'm offended. Come on, let's get this together. So it makes them pay attention to it. I just said, everything counts. Like they know, and every time, not doing it now, but every class, I wear my little jacket and bow tie.
Your bow tie,
right? Yeah. Like I'm on Zoom. I'm not wearing pants, but I'm on Zoom, and I wear that. Like I don't have to do it. I'm at home,
right?
But I don't want them to see me, so they're like in bed or something. It's like, No. Like I'm
Everything
bringing my
counts.
game. I'm bringing my A game to you every day.
Yeah.
And I do that in school. Like I'm always dressed up and stuff because I do. I really bring my A game all the time, and everything's really important. And I think they pick up on that. We're lucky because for what we're doing, we don't need like an electron microscope or an atom smasher or a concert hall. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we do need for some of the stuff I do, though, there is equipment that's required. And for the remote thing, the students do not have access to like the photo studio at school and the gear and that kind of stuff. So that was a challenge. And so what I did for that was I had them work two things. I had them work with lights you can just get at Home Depot that are cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of a thing I teach with anyway, because I use it on an assignment. You know, I had to do a CEO thing a million years ago in, I can't remember, South Carolina or something. Flew down there like from LaGuardia, went through Atlanta, I think. And it's the thing, you fly down, you get there like 11, you have to set up, you shoot the guy CEO like 1:30 till 2, you pack up, you go back to the airport, you take a 5 o'clock flight, you go through Atlanta and you get back to New York at 9:30. It's like really common, what it used to be.
Right.
So I got to wherever I was going, no assistant, just on my own. And none of the gear made it at all. It all got stuck in Atlanta, right? I have my cameras, I always carry the cameras. And there's a local assistant there who I connected with to help me on the shoot. And it wasn't a place in a city that had like rental gear. It wasn't even a big thing then, place that had rental gear. And I kind of feeling desperate. And I just said, like, is there a Lowe's or a Home Depot? And the guy said, yeah. So I went there. I went to like the lighting department.
You got some
picked up
floodlights?
No, a shop light, like you'd have over your thing in the garage, like a 4-foot fluorescent shop light like that.
Yes.
It's $39. I got those clamp lights. It's like $750, right?
Yeah.
I brought it to this guy's office, CEO's office, and I had my assistant hold the 4-foot fluorescent and move it. And instead of the guy thinking I'm a clown, like, hey, there's no soft boxes or umbrellas, I had my assistant holding the light. He probably thought, wow, this guy's really discerning. Oh, he's very, very precise. And I shot the thing with that. It ended up being a magazine cover. I gave the light to my assistant, flew back to New York. And in a way, it was liberating. It's like, well, shit, not like I don't need the other stuff, but the thing is, I wasn't shooting available light. Like I wasn't stuck looking for a window.
Right.
I could still control it and make something cool. So that's the thing I pass on to my students, because they start to think, oh, I can never do that because I need the cool lights. Or in the studio, obviously, they have really great stuff. But these students leave school, they're not going to have 50 grand to drop on pro photo fancy gear, which is great. I don't have that stuff. I'm a successful guy. Like I don't have that stuff.
But in a sense, are you teaching them at that point? You're teaching them that it is about light, not the lights.
That's my class. It's actually called Light and Concept. It's not lighting. It's light. Because the idea is like, if you're a documentary photographer, which many of them will be, you actually can't screw around with stuff. So the lighting that you do is you say, the light's over there, like a window or door, whatever it is. Yeah. And my subject is over here. The only way I can change the lighting is where my ass is like, okay, if that's there and this is here, where do I need to be? Right. And that's lighting in a sense. And I think there are documentary photographers whose work stands out because they just, maybe even just intuitively, but they really know kind of where they need to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to me, that's lighting. Lighting can also be with your iPhone. Lighting can also be from a neon sign at a bar. It could be car headlights. It literally could be anything. So they kind of start to recognize that. And then for part of the class, the latter part of the class, we work with like little flashes, like speed lights. Mm-hmm. And so I had them all buy the same kit, like the generic little speed light kit. And it's like $120 for like the flash, the thing, the umbrella, little stand, like really simple. But at that point, they can pretty much do a ton of stuff. And most of what I do initially is show them just how to use one light really well. Like if you can use one light well, you're like 85% of the way there. Right. Because always in any situation, one light's like doing the heavy lifting. One light is kind of defining the picture. Right. And plus, it's just easier to juggle one ball. Like if you're using the one light, but then you need a fill light, but then you need a kicker, and then you need a highlight.
Throw a hair light on
Like
top,
you get so screwed up, you don't know what's going on or what the thing is that's making it not right.
Right.
But if you can just see the one, you're pretty. Like I have all kinds of lights going on in the back. This window's kind of the light. It kind of is the light.
That's the one, right?
It kind of is, So it's sort of like that. Like if you can get that going, that's really defines it. So we do that.
So we're talking about gear a little bit. And that of course it reminds me for you of Canon. And I was told
Canon?
you were
Canon. I'm sorry.
You were one of the first explorers of light, because in our portion of the the portrait and wedding photographer industry, for the most part, is where I'm coming from.
Sure.
An explorer of light is that's like top of the mountain, man. Those are the people that we look at. Those are the people that we study. Those are the images that we just spend hours and hours going through and trying to learn from the imagery itself. And then I was told you're actually even a Canon legend.
A myth. It's more like I'm a myth.
You're in the myth part.
I never existed. It's just a myth.
Were you even there?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're in a sense, you're a living legend. All right. Let's throw it out there like that. And I have a sense that that's not going to go well with you. I get that.
It's from a long time ago. It was like before the wheel, but after fire. That's when the explorers came in. It was kind of like that. Something like that.
Well, but that's Canon's a big deal for our industry in general.
Sure. Yeah.
Globally. What has it been like for you to have someone like that essentially walk alongside of you for a large portion of your career? That's pretty nice, hasn't it?
No, it's honestly a great thing. And I think it's so interesting when the explorers happened, because I think that maybe it was like after the 84 Olympics or something. Two things happened then. I think one was that you saw fewer and fewer black lenses at sporting events, and you started seeing light gray lenses.
Yeah.
Right. That was a big change. Like you didn't see any before. You really did. And similarly, all we saw was yellow boxes of film. And after 84, we started seeing a lot of green boxes of film.
Very interesting.
Nobody even fooled you. Like who even knew what that was? Like nobody did that.
Right.
Those two things happened. And I think that when digital kicked in is where Canon started to separate themselves a lot. And I think when the video kicked in, they really separated themselves a lot. So I think they've really elevated themselves to another level. They've done a really good job. Like they make I'm not saying it because I'm with them, although I would, but I'm not. It's like they actually make really good stuff. They've really stayed at the forefront. It's a pretty cool thing. That stuff doesn't happen.
How important has it been? Let me put it this way, because my wife and I have had a studio for 22 years, and if there's one thing that I feel has been super important is to be innovative and to try to be kind of ahead of the curve, really. Sure. And we've seen other companies that were unsuccessful at doing that, and some of them no longer exist for that. A lot of them no
longer exist. Yeah.
Right. So I feel like that's really what Canon in particular has modeled for such a long time, is to be innovative and ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to know, and what I'd really like to finish with, is did you ever know Dean Collins?
Oh, sure. He was great. Yes. Yeah.
You remind me an awful lot of Dean.
Really?
Collins.
Oh, that's cool. That's a good compliment. Yeah. No, I thought he was like a really charismatic person, first of all, but his thing was lighting, and he simplified it. That's a tough thing. A lot of times you go to a talk, and instead of walking out of there, it's a funny deal. Like a talker, all kinds of different things that have like a esteemed professional. You actually walk out feeling a little bit diminished. Like, well, I guess I can never do that. It's like
precisely. And don't
it's
you
like
get
Chevy
a sense
Chase
sometimes...
used to do. I'm Chevy Chase and you're not. That was like his thing on Saturday Night Live.
Right, but don't you get a sense that sometime that there's even a little bit of there's that intentional piece even coming from the instructor sometime?
Oh, for sure.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Like
and I feel like Dean was one of those guys
separate themselves from the masses, and Dean didn't do that at all.
No, he was the opposite.
I have a
He's
sense
like,
that you're
this
not
is
like
easy.
that
You could do that. No. I mean, I certainly don't try to be. It's like, yeah. I mean, my thing for sure is for the students is to like demystify it. Like, this isn't anywhere near as hard as you think it is. You can totally do this. Yeah, like you already do it. You just don't know that you do it. Is that kind of thing. You know, it ain't rocket science. Like, it's fine. It's not. I mean, we joke about it in critiques. Like, critiques can be very fussy. And I've been in critiques in photo school where they put up something and it's like, and it's like, well, I like this part. There's a certain kind of activity in this part of the picture and attention. And it's like, I have no idea what this guy's talking about. None, right? And I say to the students, it's a smell test. I don't mean to be crude, but it's like you put up a picture and within like a microsecond, you have a response to it.
Yeah.
You can talk about it and intellectualize it and explore why you're having that response for sure. But immediately, and after you have that response, I can tell you why it's good. And you're like, no, if you say so, man, I don't know. And I could be a teacher who says this picture's not great. And you're thinking, to me, it seems good. Nah, I really like it. Do you know what I mean? So people already, they do know that right off the bat. Like my mom would know, my uncle would know. Like they know. They might not know why, but they know. You know, really. Like,
I think that's really, really well said, and you remind me of him even more.
Yeah.
You know what? Thank you. Thank you for spending your time with me today. And
no, it's fun. Thank you for tolerating this. That's great.
Oh my word! I really, really appreciate it. Where's the best place for people to go and see your work and see more about you?
The Smithsonian. No, I have a website. This is GregoryHeisler.com, but I am a terrible person. I haven't updated it in ages. I just have not paid it. From a business standpoint, I'm not the world's best. I'm just going to say it right out. It's key to be. I emphasize that to my students for sure. Mm-hmm. But from the beginning, if I had a choice of sending out an invoice or taking another picture, I'm taking another picture. You know, and I think you can't do that. You just can't do that, you know, but they could look at my website, I guess, or what they really should do is buy my book. It's called Gregory Heisler 50 Portraits. Mm-hmm. And my daughters will appreciate it if they buy a book. It's a great thing. But a lot of it's there. And honestly, that book, I did the book because it was the book I always wanted. Yeah. Like I didn't want a photo book of like my pictures speak for themselves. And I didn't want a photo book that was too much f-stops and shutter speeds. I want like, why did you make that picture? And what made you make those choices? And how come you did it with this camera instead of that one? Like, so the book is like that. It kind of talks about the process of the picture and a little bit of technical, but it doesn't beat you over the head with it for sure. So I think people would like it. If they're interested in photography, I think they get a kick out of it for sure. Yeah,
I appreciate it so much. You're a very gracious, humble man, and I appreciate your time. It means an awful lot to me, and I think it'll mean an awful lot to our listeners. Thank you so much.
It's super fun, man. It's my pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure to be here for sure. Thank you for having me.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this conversation presented by White House Custom Color on YouTube. Be sure to check out our other content and click that subscribe button right there. Right. Right there. It's there somewhere.